Then we pay the price, as we did on Friday and Saturday.
We've given an in-principle decision to expand Gatwick. That has never happened before, although it's something that the airport has been asking for a long time. So we're not kicking this into the long grass. There's some work to be done to make sure that it can be done without all the judicial reviews that so often hold up infrastructure in the UK. And we've also made a commitment to have spades in the ground in this Parliament at Heathrow when we build a third runway there. So this government are getting on with the job, building the infrastructure, whether that is the digital infrastructure, the transport infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, or indeed the 1.5 million homes that this country needs. Okay. We're backing the builders, not the blockers.
OK, well, I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to discuss that, but let's get on with what you're going to do this week, which is a spring statement. The Office of Budget Responsibility is going to slash its growth forecast, we hear. Some say by as much as...
When a politician gets too confident, unexpected things tend to happen. It seems Rachel Reeves misjudged the situation when she assumed Trevor Phillips would go easy on her live on air. He didn't hesitate to expose the weaknesses in her arguments, and what he said left her almost speechless, struggling to respond. It also shocked everyone watching the show. The snowball began when Trevor Phillips calmly turned to Rachel Reeves and asked her to clearly explain the £22 billion black hole she kept referring to as the reason for the austerity she introduced in the budget.
But Trevor, your question is, do tax increases have an impact on the economy? Of course they do. But imagine if I'd have done something else last October. Imagine if I'd have swept the problems under the carpet and said everything was fine. Then today, when we face the aggression from Russia, we wouldn't have the additional money to spend on defence. We would be in a situation where NHS waiting lists will continue.
It's not additional money. You took it out of overseas aid. It's not additional money. You took it out of the international aid budget.
Yes, we made that decision, but if the public finances weren't on a firm footing, we'd have to be raiding budgets to prop up the public finances. Instead, we were able to redirect money from international development to defence spending.
The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Although the question may have sounded gentle, its impact was both sharp and profound. Reeves, who holds one of the most crucial economic positions in the country, appeared momentarily unsettled. For someone tasked with overseeing the nation's finances, it was striking that she couldn't pinpoint where that figure actually came from, nor could she provide a convincing explanation for it.
Working people will think that non-DOMs get sympathy and people on welfare get tough love.
This is about tackling fraud in the benefits system, and quite right too. If people aren't entitled to benefits, they shouldn't be getting them. And at the moment, we waste billions of pounds as a country every year in giving money to people who aren't entitled to it. And what we're saying is if you're ripping off the state and ripping off other taxpayers, we will take money directly out of your bank account and you risk losing your driving licence. So proper penalties for people who frankly, are getting money that they are not entitled to, and we'll crack down on that. By the end of the forecast period, we're going to be raising more than £4 billion a year by cracking down on fraud and error. For too long, this has gone unchecked. And I think most working people would say, absolutely spot on. I don't want to pay my tax to subsidise somebody who's not entitled to support.
What unfolded over the next 5 minutes was not merely a political stumble, but a complete unravelling. Reeves contradicted herself, dismissed figures that didn't suit her narrative, and ultimately left viewers more confused than informed. She ended up offering no clear answers. This wasn't just a clumsy exchange, it was a moment of exposure, and for anyone who has long suspected that politicians use statistics as a shield rather than a spotlight to illuminate the truth, this interview felt like living proof.
No, but you have to be straight with people. How many civil servants are going to lose their jobs in broad terms? OK, I'm not asking you for, 532 or 5,027, but broadly speaking, is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 15,000?
We've said a 10 to 15%, 15% by the end of the Parliament reduction in admin budgets. In admin budgets. So that includes consultancy, it includes travel budgets, it includes communications budgets. So it doesn't all have to be about people. But when we make those savings,
it's going to be about people.
And when
you can't say this is going to be pain-free.
No, but what I am saying is it will deliver better public services, because I would rather we had people employed by the NHS working in our hospitals rather than in a government department. So this is about doing things differently and putting money where people see it most. During COVID...
Charles, this is what people say about politicians. I ask you a question that says, broadly speaking, how many roles are going to get lost? I cannot believe that you're telling your colleagues we need to take 10% out without any idea how many of those are going to be actual jobs. I just cannot believe that that's what you're doing.
I'm confident that we can reduce civil service numbers by 10,000. And in the, during COVID, there were big increases in the number of people who were working in the civil service. That was the right thing to do to respond to those challenges. But it's not right that we just keep those numbers there forever, because they haven't been cut back since COVID, despite the fact that the world has changed since then.
Phillips' question was seemingly a routine technical query, but in fact a carefully calibrated strike. Could you explain exactly what this £22 billion black hole is? With his tone calm and measured, the blade cut straight to the heart of the matter. This was not a mere request for clarification. It was a direct assault on the foundation of Reeves' entire economic argument, and what followed wasn't the usual stumble or a momentary lapse. It was a slow, unmistakable collapse. The gradual disintegration of a message once meticulously crafted, now falling apart piece by piece. Reeves initially cast herself as a realist, reluctantly acknowledging the uncomfortable truth that the figure in question was the inevitable result of years of governmental financial negligence. She presented herself as the calm, responsible chancellor, forced to deliver bad news, like a doctor informing a patient of a chronic illness, with the only cure being a harsh but necessary course of treatment. Everything was carefully orchestrated, from her expression and tone to the overall message. She sought to frame the spending cuts as reasonable, even unavoidable. The argument was neat, there was no alternative, and the delivery was serious, with every sentence sounding as if it had been rehearsed in advance. But Trevor Phillips wasn't buying it. With his wealth of experience in holding those in power to account, he knew exactly what to do. He didn't raise his voice or resort to dramatic rebukes. Instead, he cut straight to the core. Phillips calmly produced official documents from the Treasury and pointed out with quiet precision that the figures Reeves had referenced didn't seem to align with the numbers published by her government. This was no ordinary interview in which a journalist simply awaits an answer. It was a slow, deliberate unravelling, step by step, aimed at exposing the fragility of a political narrative. Phillips methodically revisited each of Reeves' public statements, comparing them with actual figures, and gradually the discrepancies began to speak louder than any explanation offered from either side. As Reeves struggled to maintain the coherence of her argument, the story she had so carefully constructed began to wobble under the spotlight of scrutiny. At first, she insisted the £22 billion shortfall stemmed from day-to-day spending, but then, inexplicably, she shifted to claim it was related to capital investment. Minutes later, she appeared to pivot yet again, as though she too was getting lost in a maze of her own recycled talking points. This wasn't a fleeting lapse. It felt more like a clear warning that even the Chancellor herself may be confused about the financial crisis she's trying to explain. What made this exchange compelling wasn't simply Reeves' effort to provide an answer. The real draw lay in how she handled the mounting pressure. Instead of offering clarity, Reeves hesitated. Rather than adjusting her message, she doubled down on her original line. Each attempt to explain the £22 billion shortfall only further entangled her argument, revealing not just a clumsy moment in communication, but a deeper issue with how the message had been constructed. Phillips, for his part, maintained a subtle approach with no need for sharp rebukes. He simply repeated what Reeves had said previously and quoted directly from government documents. When she tried to deflect, he gently steered the conversation back. When she evaded, he calmly repeated the question. The result was a rare political moment. An interview that not only exposed weaknesses in the argument, but also laid bare a more fundamental fragility in the narrative Labour is attempting to sell. Watching Reeves try to untangle her earlier remarks was like watching someone attempt to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. It was all confusion, tension, and the creeping realization that there may be no way out. It was clear that her grip on the issue didn't just waver, it seemed to vanish altogether from the situation. As the interview progressed, the inconsistencies in Reeves's argument stopped being occasional missteps and started to resemble a recurring pattern. One of the most striking moments came when Trevor Phillips cited a detailed report from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, a long-established and respected institution known for its analysis of poverty and inequality. The report painted a bleak economic picture. Poverty rates rising, wages stagnating, and millions of families struggling to meet even the most basic costs. These figures stood in stark contrast to the optimistic narrative Reeves was trying to promote. Yet, rather than engage with the evidence, offering reasoning or counter data, she simply dismissed the report outright. No response, no rebuttal, just denial. It wasn't just an unconvincing political moment. It raised real concerns about how Reeves is shaping economic policy. Is she genuinely considering the full picture, or merely selecting data that aligns with her party's narrative? Ignoring a study from a leading authority like Rowntree gives the impression of someone clinging to convenience rather than confronting economic reality. This approach evokes the image of a leader who crafts the story first and then hunts for numbers to back it up. If the interview itself didn't shake public confidence, what followed certainly did, particularly after it emerged that Reeves had attended a VIP concert at the O2 Arena while championing fiscal restraint and sacrifice. And this wasn't your average seat. We're talking exclusive access to a luxury seating private entrance, the full high-end experience. The contrast between her call for austerity and a lavish setting couldn't have been starker. While ordinary families are struggling to pay heating bills, cutting back on groceries and worrying about rising mortgage rates, the image of a chancellor enjoying a life of luxury feels like a slap in the face. It's not just a matter of bad timing, it exposes an unacceptable disconnect between the leadership's calls for frugality and their behaviour.
Every time she went, I mean, we need someone else who does that, don't we? The Prime Minister.
Oh, yes.
How could she possibly use the phrase, I thought it was the right thing to do? The right thing for you to do, Rachel Reeves, is to work on sorting out our completely tanking economy, not to be seen to be taking hospitality and having a good time. I'm sorry that when you actually have that job as Chancellor of the Exchequer, your life isn't about having a good time. After all, you're doing an awful lot of things that are making other people's lives an awful lot more difficult.
Exactly right. And come Wednesday, I mean, I don't know where she's going to go. I mean, I've just been speaking to Dave Penman from one of the civil service unions, who used to be a lot more vicious and nasty about government. He seems to have sort of rolled over and become like a pussycat. He was saying how, you know, well, it's not for the civil service to decide how big it is. It's down to the government. So I basically said to him, so what, you're going to be OK with all of these redundancies? Well, we'll just have to see. We'll make sure people are treated. I mean, can you imagine the Tories suddenly announced they're going to get rid of 50,000 civil servants? The howling. You'd be hearing it all the way down Whitehall and up to Covent Garden.
Well, we did hear that. I mean, I was a reporter on the Sunday Times as political editor when the Conservatives tried very hard to do this. The campaign was led by the then Francis Maud, worked in the Cabinet Office, and he worked very hard to try to cut the civil service very substantially. And he has since...
The whole situation reads like something straight out of a George Orwell novel, with a government official preaching austerity while living in comfort. For many, this isn't merely tone deaf, it's a blatant insult that has rendered Reeves' economic message already unconvincing, to some even more hollow and contradictory. When politicians ask the public to make sacrifices, they must lead by example. Reeves, however, chose the opposite path. As public trust continues to erode, independent economists have begun scrutinising the validity of the so-called £22 billion black hole, the central justification behind Reeves' calls for fiscal tightening.
Many viewers will remember, and many viewers were very, very cross when you had just moved into office. It emerged that the Prime Minister and other Labour politicians and you had accepted donations of clothes. In the last few days, it's also emerged that you accepted free tickets for a corporate box to see the singer Sabrina Carpenter at London's O2 Arena this month. Is that what happened? And if you did, why are free clothes a no-no, but free concert tickets is a yes, please?
I went with a member of my family to see a concert a couple of weeks ago. I do now have security, which means it's not as easy as it would have been in the past to just sit in a concert. although that would probably be a lot easier for everyone concerned. So, look, I took those tickets to go with a member of my family. I thought that was the right thing to do from a security
Did you
perspective.
pay for them? Because you could pay for them.
Well, these weren't tickets that you could pay for. So there wasn't a price to those tickets. Obviously, I will declare that the value of them, but they weren't tickets that you were able to buy.
OK, Rachel Reeves, it's a big week for you, big busy week.
Their verdict. The figures simply don't stand up to proper scrutiny. Some economists argue that what Rachel Reeves describes as a serious financial black hole is in fact the result of loose budgeting and overly short-term accounting assumptions. The issue, they say, is not a looming catastrophe, but a misalignment. One that could be addressed with long-term thinking and a measured approach. They believe this is not an unavoidable crisis, but rather a narrative constructed to justify harsh decisions. Some analysts suggest that Reeves' proposals such as tax rises could inflict more harm than good. Her measures, rather than aiding the economic recovery, risk slowing growth, stalling investment, and placing further strain on working households. While Reeves maintains that she's addressing economic instability, others argue she may be adding to it. There is a growing sense that her framing of the financial story isn't grounded in necessity, but strategy. The black hole Reeves refers to seems to lie not in the nation's finances, but in her approach to them. If you enjoyed this political discussion, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating political content.